and you have your injury at that point. And so, how do you end up getting back into music?
So at that point, I mean, skateboarding and snowboarding and being in Montreal where there wasn't that much of a metal scene compared to these smaller towns in Quebec. Eventually, like, it became more and more hip hop and a little bit of punk also. But one thing that marked me for me was like the transition of hip hop that became dark, and for me, like there was a clear bridge between metal and hip hop. When we started hearing like 90, 91, when we started hearing like Public Enemy, Onyx, like Cypress Hill, and fucking Wu Tang. And Wu Tang was like, for me, changed everything. But those bands in particular, they were so dark and they were so like violent, and they, for me, my ear, my mind, my soul felt it like metal. And also the way they would rap and the technical and their individuality as MCs for me was like the dopest fucking guitar player in the world was this guy. But it's not notes, it's words, and it's written with his mouth, and also it's like it's messages. And now the it's not just like metal where it's symbols and these gnarly sounds that are demonic or this or that. There's like fucking like, let's say, Public Enemy. There's messages. There's like true activism. There's like true some fun, some words that can like get a whole crowd rowdy or some, and then eventually that, yeah, I mean that at one point it was just hip hop. I didn't want to listen to anything anymore. So this is around, I had been listening for years, but I mean around by the age of 18, I mean, I didn't want to listen to anything. At 92, I didn't want to listen nothing else than hip hop. There was so much stuff going on. It was like you had to know which one, what was coming out. How was the sound going to change?
So that's where I wanted to go with that right next. So this is where like it's super interesting to just hear from it. So you're in Montreal in the early 90s getting into hip hop. I don't even think I've talked to that many people that are in that era from that time that are cognizant of what's going on. So what's it like how do you get access to music at that time? Like, how do you discover your new hip hop?
Well, it was really friends. I mean, friends of friends. We'd still kind of skateboard, so just as a mean of transport in general, we'd just fuck around. But we'd go to a lot of parties, like house parties. And then it was at that point there was still like there was CDs, but the cassettes were still pretty much there. And a big thing, like in house parties, was like discover the rarest fucking thing. And if you'd come to a party and you'd have like the rarest thing, and because this is like there's not really internet, people would flip out, man. And you'd be like kind of the star of the show, and also you just like you make your that passion you had for that new band. You share it with people. I remember, let's say, everyone liked Cypress Hill, and then I remember going to a party and some guy came with a dubbed cassette, like just like a cassette that was taped on this band called the Mexicans with Z at the end, which was another Latino LA band. They weren't as good as Cypress Hill, but they kind of sounded like them, and no one knew them. I remember like 3 parties later, I heard that same cassette that was dubbed from a cassette that was dubbed for another cassette. That like the sound quality would go down to every party, because no one had the original. No one knew how to get the original. And then there was other shit. Like there was I think it was on McGill College. There was a place called Faction Music, I think. That was like a New York guy, or he would go to New York and he would bring back like mixtapes and stuff like that. So there was a couple of those shops also. And so it was really word-to-mouth parties. It was a couple of obscure shops. And, yeah, and that was just before the Internet. Then the Internet hit, and it was the whole other game. It kind of accelerated our knowledge and the sharing of the whole thing. And there was no downloads at that point, but at least we'd see, let's say, pictures of the dudes. I remember, like, let's say Wu-Tang comes out, 9 guys, and they all have fucking masks, and there's a ski mask or whatever, a nylon. There's no real big internet thing going on. We didn't know who was who. I mean, it was a mythology. It was like, I remember I thought Ghostface Killer was actually the voice of ODB and this guy and that guy. So it was just like the conversation between us. Oh no, that's this guy or that's that guy, and then oh, but he's the dopest. But we had no fucking clue. It's just so mysterious, you know. It was exciting.
I didn't even think about that before. I mean, like, I've looked at the cover, and I'm pretty sure it's because Ghostface had a warrant, so they did the mask so that they could all be there or some shit or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the music videos. Anyway, I don't know what it was, but, like, the fact is, if you're just looking at these guys and you just even see their videos or you see all their content, there's not, unless you caught that one video where, like, 4 of them are identified, it is super fucking hard to actually piece together which dude is which dude.
That's it.
And just, like, even, like, just like listening, trying to map out the names of people without, I don't know if they had lyrics back then in the stuff. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But without lyrics, you just get 9 guys rapping across like a bunch of music, and then you got to piece together who's who and map out the voices without the help of lyric sites.
Yeah.
That's a whole different world.
Yeah, and back then also we were like trip, right? Let's say, and we'll get stuff always like a year later in Montreal. So let's say I remember discovering Gravediggers just before Wu-Tang, so this 94. And then by the end of 94, I discovered Wu-Tang. But also, like, I remember fucking tripping on Gravediggers, and there was, like, it was the beginning of the internet, so not everyone had the internet. And to find, like, a site that, let's say, had lyrics, that was any site at that point. It was very basic internet. So a big thing was, like, listen to the CD, pause just go a couple bars, write down the music by hand, man. Pause it, put it down. Sometimes you're not sure about the words, you're just fucking it up. But you take like 2 hours to write down the lyrics as a fan, and just to fucking get that song by heart, you know. And then go to the next party, the song goes on, and you know that fucking song by heart, dude. You're flowing, and everyone's like, "Oh shit, that's fucking insane," you know. So it was just like everything. You kind of had to work for it, even as a fan, you know. There was an adventure around it.
Yo, that's like a whole different level. I mean, just think about the things you say. Shout out Jouer avec le doux for the follow. But like, think about everything you just said. First of all, the party vibe. I want to figure out how to recreate this party vibe where we all trying to flex on we know more underground shit than you. Like, who can drop the coolest shit in the world. Like, that sounds like a flex that could be done today stills, because the opposite, here's the beauty of today. There's just so much music that now nobody's heard everything. Even you could just do this in Montreal. You could play who's the best in Montreal, and everybody shows up with their best Montreal cut. And you could probably every fucking 3 months have a completely fresh list every single time, and nobody would have heard of anything. That's actually a sick idea. I'm going to remember that one.
Sure.
But yeah. So like, that vibe sounds amazing. Like, popular music in clubs is a vibe, but like, rare cuts, like, and you're not the first person to say it. I was talking to Duskad, and he was like, yo, that's my favorite shit. I'm like, wait, there's just people who love this? There's like this culture of like people who dig around and find the most obscure shit. And I mean, I know it exists, but just to think about it at a party is amazing. But then you gotta like figure out who's, write down the lyrics by hand, memorize these motherfuckers, some shit that might have taken me 30, 40 minutes, you're taking hours for. Because I mean, by the time I'm in high school, it's the 2000, 2005 era. So like, yeah, lyric sites exist. We could just print it out and fucking run it. But like, that's a lot of cool shit. Like, that's like an era where it almost feels like you're forced to care more, and it almost explains a bit why maybe people care a lot more about lyrics, right? You're gonna have to listen to that motherfucker for 2.5 hours straight just to get those lyrics down. You're gonna have to really fucking like those lyrics. Like,
that's
really, it can't
that's
be
it.
some vapid shit.
That's it. That's just that those days I was just a fan. I wasn't writing my own stuff yet. We're talking about 95, 97. I started writing my own stuff in 98. So yeah, so that just as a fan, man, I was like, whoa. And at the same time, without knowing, I was studying lyricism, and I was studying flows, man, and just as a super fan, you know. And knowledge was so important in those days. Well, at least for me and a lot of people I know. I mean, you'd buy. It wasn't like today, a download and stuff. You'd buy the CD, and right away you check like who's the producer of every track and where did they record and this and that, you know. So it was there. There was really we cared about knowledge. We really when we talked about hip hop, we wanted to know really what was going. We wanted to share that knowledge with people. You know, oh no, this guy. Oh yeah, Gangstar. Oh yeah, Gangstar. That's DJ Premier. Oh yeah, he's a producer. He's a DJ also, and he produced this new track. You know, by let's say fucking Jeru the Damager. Oh, who's Jeru the Damager? Well, fucking, you should check that album out. So there was always a link between an artist and another because of the producers, of course.
Yo, that's super cool. I wonder why people stop going that direction with producers. Producers are fascinating. Like, they're the, like, glue of a lot of shit, in my opinion. So, like, I'm super, like, even behind the scenes here, producers work with everybody, whereas rappers don't work with everybody. And so just producers inherently become more interesting on that front. Plus, they can usually engineer, which makes them way more fun to know than, you know, I'm not,
Yeah,
it's not my favorite
sure.
thing in the world.